15 years have been marked by bold advances in the struggle to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. And C2N Diagnostics has been on the front line of discovery.
C2N Diagnostics is in the midst of a transformation of clinical care, and that doesn't happen too often in medicine. We have the ability to really transform and elevate the quality of care for Alzheimer's disease. C2N originated in the laboratory of Dr. David Holtzman and Dr. Randall Bateman, who have really been pioneers in the field.
We were trying to understand, how does the brain make a protein called amyloid beta that is what comprises the amyloid plaques in the brain of Alzheimer's disease?
Alzheimer's is the most common type of degenerative brain diseases, collectively known as dementia.
Dementia means the loss of memory and thinking, cognitive functions. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia in people over the age of 65. Well, Alzheimer's disease affects over 7 million people in the United States and about 55 million people globally. Those numbers are only going to go up as our population ages. Current estimates for the cost of Alzheimer's disease are in the hundreds of billions. It'll reach $1 trillion in the next 10 or 20 years, and that's in the US alone.
The human cost goes far beyond money.
We're all personally touched by this disease. We see how complex and difficult the diagnostic journey is for these patients. And so when we think about diagnostics at C2N, we say, well, what can we do to shorten that timeline?
Between 2000 and 2006, we developed a technique that was able to show that in patients who develop Alzheimer's disease, amyloid beta is cleared slower.
When we were doing that study, it's just the time when drug companies were designing these drugs to lower down amyloid beta production. The problem was they didn't have a direct way to measure it.
Different companies came to us and said, look, can we use your technique to test our drug to measure if amyloid was being cleared?
So we said, sure. As doctors, we have an obligation that our science should matter. We have to take our discoveries and we have to get them out in the real world, and they have to be applied to help people.
When C2N was formed in 2007, its technology was immediately enlisted to measure the impact of amyloid plaque buildup in the brain. C2N's founders envisioned a way their platform could transform how the disease was diagnosed.
We didn't know if it was going to be spinal fluid tests or ultimately blood tests, but it definitely was a goal to develop some sort of diagnostic test. We started making measurements of using a fancy scale called a mass spectrometer, where we could measure the absolute levels of amyloid and tau proteins in the blood.
Incorporating the mass spectrometer spurred a breakthrough.
While we were measuring in blood, we consistently found a protein that was altered in people who had amyloid plaques and Alzheimer's disease. So we realized we actually could have a highly accurate measure of Alzheimer's disease in the blood.
C2N was able to file an application that we call Breakthrough Device Designation with the FDA. They said, well, this addresses an urgent, unmet medical need.
In 2018, the FDA determined that the Precivity AD test was addressing an urgent and unmet medical need and granted it Breakthrough Device Designation to screen for Alzheimer's disease pathology.
Once it really became something that patients could get access to and doctors could use to help with diagnoses, that's when GHR got seriously interested in C2N Diagnostics.
That early partnership was an essential part of funding that really helped transition C2N Diagnostics from an R&D-based company to a commercial clinical diagnostics lab.
In 2020, C2N launched its first clinical blood test for Alzheimer's, called the Precivity AD test.
In 2023, we introduced our second generation test, which is Precivity AD2 blood test. And that's the test that's really transforming the current clinical standard of care.
The ability to diagnose the disease with a blood test is a huge advance. I mean, this particular test is so accurate.
There's 3 modalities for getting a precise diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease: cerebrospinal fluid analysis through lumbar puncture, amyloid PET scans, or highly accurate blood tests. like the Precivity 82 test.
Lumbar punctures and PET scans are both costly and inaccessible to billions of people.
The current blood test should be able to replace getting these very expensive diagnostic tests and enable patients to get on treatment.
C2N Diagnostics was involved in helping to demonstrate the effectiveness of two drugs that are now fully FDA approved. Lecanemab, which is marketed by Eisai and Biogen, and donanemab, which is marketed by Lilly.
We're finally getting some treatments that do something to get this treatment out there to the masses of people that need it.
C2N's groundbreaking diagnostics have given the company a global reach.
C2N has begun partnering with leading clinical reference labs throughout the world, and we're able to transfer the technology and enable them to be able to offer the diagnostic testing with the same level of quality and precision.
C2N's Precivity tests have the potential to reshape the future for those diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Early diagnosis turns out to be critically important and also incredibly difficult. Everyone in the field is very excited about the advent of the highly accurate blood test.
When people get to a certain age, they can get a blood test that will look to see whether they're developing the early changes of Alzheimer's disease or not. And then if it's negative, then they'll probably get screened again 10 years later.
The real promise here is prevention. Imagine if we could actually prevent people from getting the disease in the first place. In terms of the symptoms, the dementia, the cognitive decline, the disability, the dependence. If we could avoid those things, that's what all our patients want. That's what families want. That's what we all want. There's the very real possibility, if we continued in the right way, within 5 years, we could have treatments that prevent the onset of symptomatic Alzheimer's disease.